Hi, my name is Jeff Farrington, and I'm here to speak on behalf of Jim Gerber for Master Teacher. Just to give you a little background, I believe I am qualified to speak on behalf of Jim. I worked with him for a decade. I was a colleague at first. He taught both math and science. I was in the science department, and then I became his direct supervisor as a principal of the middle and high school. He was involved with the leadership team as head of department, so I sat in meetings with him and the rest of the leadership team twice a month. I was involved with dozens of observations in his classroom, watching him teach and work with students, and I sat in on his math department meetings as head of department. And of course, as head of department, I would involve him in the hiring process. So there is quite a lot of interaction that I've had with Jim Gerber. So firstly, speaking about master teacher, we have to talk about teaching and learning, how much students learn in the classroom. And understanding that, I'm going to frame it as learning is that purposeful cognitive struggle that teachers purposefully put students in, trying to get them from something that they don't know to something that they know. So the first thing is find out, Jim does so well, is where is the learner? He doesn't just launch headlong into this is the content of the unit, we're all going to start here. He tries to figure out where each learner is at, and he uses diagnostic tools to do that. He uses both whole and individual diagnostic tools, and once he finds out where each learner is, he plans his instruction from that. And that's where the dance of the instruction and assessment comes in with Jim. And that's where he shows his craftsmanship. Jim is exceptional at working with kids in what they call that zone of proximal development. He will have students who the material will be much too hard for them. But he frames it and he works with those students in a way that allows them to have some success, so that they don't give up. And then he'll also have some very high flyers in his math class, and oftentimes in schools, those are the least served students. They come into a unit of study, they know the material already. 2 weeks later, after instruction, they know the material. But Jim does an exceptional job of working with those students, intervening in their instruction in ways that provide them with enrichment, so that they actually do demonstrate learning, even though they may have already understood the concepts that were to be taught in the unit of study. He uses a variety of instructional strategies. He oftentimes ties things to real life. He tries to make math instruction relevant and authentic for students. And the craftsmanship that comes in with Jim comes in play. Specifically, I'll give you an example where I've watched him in lessons teach a certain concept different ways for students. So they have an opportunity to solve a situation numerically, graphically, algebraically. He is providing different strategies, different skill sets for kids. You will never hear in Jim's class, when you see this, do this. He isn't an algorithmic teacher. He scaffolds instruction. Jim is one of the smartest mathematicians I know. His math content knowledge goes way beyond high school. However, as we know, smart people who know their content oftentimes can't teach it. And so that's not the case with Jim. He uses a variety of instructional strategies, and he mixes in procedures with assessment to find out where learners at, and he adjusts and monitors his next instructional steps based on that, so that he can provide his learners with the next best opportunities for their own growth and learning. So 3 things that we're going to get. I'm just going to adjust the camera here and take my notes out. 3 things that are true with Jim. The first one is that as he assesses students' learning, he's using both formal and informal, summative and formative, and you can be sure that it's accurate assessment. And he sometimes will adjust structures and throw out tradition when looking at assessments, so that he can get an accurate picture of what the student actually knows. Secondly, we can also be sure that confidence in learning math soars with Jim. Math learners, traditionally, it's the subject where you will hear more than any other subject. Students will say, I'm no good at math, demonstrating a fixed mindset that the gig is already up, that they are just resigned to the fact that they're no good. And so they've lost confidence. And so some of the strategies that we use in instruction or data collection or assessment often lead to lack of confidence. And so you can be sure with Jim, his methodologies build confidence in math instruction. And the third thing that you can be sure of in Jim's class about learning is he is about growth. And so when you have students in a class which is a selective class, where you have high flyers, or even in selective schools, students may come in being very smart and they leave being very smart, and the question is, well, what did we add? What value did we add? And so we can throw that question out the window with Jim. He looks at an enormous amount of student learning data. I've looked at it with him, and we've looked at where different learners are and what next steps they need to take to improve in their learning. And I'll tell you that intervention by Jim instructionally alters the achievement projection of every student. The question of could that child have done it without a teacher? We disregard that question with Jim. So the largest student growth that I've ever seen from any math teacher is with Jim Gerber, looking at where his students were and where they ended up. So not just looking at proficiency data, were they smart or did they achieve a high score? Looking at growth data, and even the highest flyers in Jim's class grow because of his interventions, because of his enrichment. The second area I'd like to talk about as far as a master teacher is beyond learning in the classroom. So how does the individual help the profession? And so starting within the school, within the department, I was introduced to Jim early on in the late 90s as a science teacher, and he was in the science department teaching physics. And I know that for me, even without a formal title of head of department, Jim was an informal mentor to many of us. I would ask Jim about lessons that I was planning on presenting to my students, and he would give me both content ideas and then pedagogical instructional methodologies that would enhance the learning in those classes. And that informal relationship exists with a lot of teachers with Jim. He does peer coaching. He has coaching conversations. He invites people to come in and see him, and he seeks out feedback in this realm as well to be better about deprivatizing practice. So that's in the department level. At the school level, as I say, Jim was part of a leadership team, a curricular leadership team, heads of departments, and his input was always valued, and I sought it. And make no mistake, Jim is not a yes guy. So as a high school principal, I would not just get a yes from Jim because he was deferential to the principalship or the role of maybe the perceived power difference. Jim agonizes over things about the school. How can we make the school better? He reflects on things. He'll present his ideas. He'll voice his opinions. And one of the great things is when the decision is made, even if it doesn't go Jim's way, he will walk out the door and he will support the decision. And so he supports the school. He is a master teacher by helping the profession get better school-wide. A simple example throughout our history together, Jim looked at some students who were misplaced in math, and he used some of the research from Jim Hattie and was looking at acceleration of students, and he developed and implemented a process to first diagnose and evaluate where learners were in their math instruction and then place them correctly. So all of our learners were better served under this whole sort of school-wide initiative that Jim brought. And thirdly, giving back to the profession, Jim is a highly sought-after AP reader and an AP consultant. And I say that because obviously the amount of time that he has given back to the College Board. But he's a Canadian, and there in the mid-2000s, it was very difficult for the United States to hire a non-American to get the right visa so that he could be paid. And the college board kept going back to Jim and asking him if he would be a reader and a presenter, a consultant, within the United States and now internationally. He's a very valued member from the college board to go out and give back to the profession. And I always thought it was very good PD for Jim, highest level, working as an AP reader and a consultant. And now I realize that Jim is not just learning, but he's also giving back and contributing to the profession. So in a nutshell, I think those two areas sum up why I believe Jim Gerber is a master teacher, fulfills the criteria, and I thank you for listening.